Now to the story. As thousands of unemployed graduates struggle to find opportunities in the public service, Parliament has raised the alarm over systemic corruption that continues to enable the existence of ghost workers who receive government salaries without actually performing any work. This fraudulent practice is draining public funds and occupying positions meant for real and qualified candidates. This concern was raised by Jan de Villiers, who is the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Public Service and Administration, during a Governance Oversight Committee briefing held yesterday. De Villiers described the ghost worker phenomenon not as a simple payroll error, but as a deliberate and orchestrated form of systemic corruption. And he's joining us now to elaborate further on this. A very good morning to you, Jan. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Is it known how huge the scale of this problem is?
Well, good morning to you and the listeners. I think that's cutting to the heart of the matter. No, we don't know how big the scale of the problem is. What we do know is that where we have done samples, where there's been audits of the Department of Education in Mpumalanga, where they found 6.5 million rand worth of ghost salaries being paid, the Department of Health in Gauteng, where they found 230 ghost employees, people who do not exist, but in salaries on the system. If that is it could be almost treated as a sample, then clearly there are thousands of ghost workers all across the public service and inside government departments.
Yeah. What does it then tell us about the system itself? Because every government employee has a personal number. If that is the case, can government, through its own initiatives, be able to verify and cross-check whether such an individual is still in its employ?
Yes, 100%. And I think it is theoretically 100% possible to do that. And I think that's why when the Government of National Unity was formed, and we very much pushed, the DA pushed for the professionalization of the state and merit-based appointments to be part of the state service, we also said very clearly that physical audits of people to determine the problem and how many ghost employees on the system must be front and center of what happens in the public service. So we honestly need a national co-working exercise by Treasury and by the Department of Public Service and Administration and by the Auditor General to set a professional framework for how these audits should take place. I think maybe just to add, government departments at the moment, the way they do staffing, it's decentralized. So every government department places their own public servants, obviously within some guidelines, but there's no national guideline for how audit should be done to find ghost workers.
Yeah. Has there ever been an explanation from the Public Service and Administration Department, at least, why they are unable to verify if everyone who is in the employ of the state is getting a single salary instead of multiple salaries? Because what we understand from this, what you describe as systemic corruption, is that the beneficiaries of these so-called ghost workers are actually government employees themselves.
Yes, so in our Portfolio Committee for Public Service and Administration, we saw a presentation by the Department of Public Service, which clearly illustrated to us that to create ghost workers on the system, you need at least 3 people to work together to load a ghost onto the system. But it takes actually more than that. It takes more than 3 people to keep the system going. And that should be a clear indication to anybody that ghost workers is just one of the symptoms of organized crime inside the government departments. And that's really what we should be doing. We should be identifying ghost workers, but realizing that behind a ghost worker salary is real people benefiting from taxpayer money, siphoning taxpayer money into their pockets. And those people need to be investigated, prosecuted, and sent to jail.
Yeah, there's an estimate that we have around 1.3 million people employed by the public sector. And now thinking about, for instance, the institutions that are equipped to deal with investigations relating to financial crime, and asking myself, for instance, the Center of Financial Intelligence, FICA, if they are not able to pick up some of these things, because the salary is paid into a bank account. Surely then the banks should be able to pick up these things, that a set individual who has a personal number, who is employed by the state, is receiving more than one income.
Yes, and I think the solution here is actually a combination between old school tactics, physical audits, people reporting to work and proving that they exist, which is already being done by Minister Dean McPherson in Public Works. But also, as you've correctly pointed out, the use of artificial intelligence and technology to look at payslips and identity numbers, using people's biometric data to try and establish if people are benefiting from more than one salary, if the people who have been loaded on the system have fake IDs or if they have real IDs, if the bank accounts that it is linked to the individual who's benefiting from the salary exists. So absolutely, there are technological solutions to this problem. But we should not forget that this is actually also real people, and that real physical audit should also take place regularly. You should be reporting to work, and you should be able to prove that you exist.
Yeah, and what would the approach then be for state-owned SOEs or state-owned companies? For instance, PRASA as an example, there has been an issue that had been raised before, even during the tenure of Fikile Mbalula as the Minister of Transport, around ghost workers. What should happen with parastatals?
Yeah, and I think it's a very important question. Parastatals are part of the public administration. State-owned entities are taxpayer-owned entities. So everything that applies to national, provincial, local, and state agencies should apply to state-owned entities as well. We should see the same scrutiny, the same physical audits being done in state-owned entities. Just because a state-owned entity is structured in a separate way, to operate in a separate way than government departments, does not take away from the fact that it is still owned by the state, owned by taxpayers, funded by taxpayers, and that the same forensic or ghost audit should be done on these state-owned entities.
Yeah. Do you think that the current legislation that we have is adequate? I'm just thinking now, for instance, about lifestyle audits and how lifestyle audits are implemented, and wondering whether our current legislation is sufficient to deal with something like that.
Yeah, so this is something very close to our committee's heart, because at the end of the day, we sit in Parliament, we're in a committee, and we are legislators. I think whether we need to legislate new measures will actually follow on what's going to be done first, and that's the physical audits and creating the professional framework, let's call it the standard operating procedure, on how we find these ghost audits. And if I can give you an opinion, I think at this stage it is not a legislative problem that we're having, because what people do when they create ghost workers is illegal. That's not the problem. I think the problem is more a practical standard operating procedure, a structural framework, creating the procedures in government to make sure that these ghosts are caught, or I should rather say that the people behind them are caught.
Yeah, because the ghosts don't exist, but it's somebody who's getting the ghost salary. But in conclusion, though, I think fundamentally what needs to change, and I know that the School of National Government, for instance, speaks about the professionalization of the public sector, is inculcating values, a value system that says that I am a state employee, I will uphold the values of the Constitution and ensure that I don't break the law. And once we get those values right, at least we won't find people trying to find loopholes.
Yes, and I think South Africa is filled with people who are ready to serve. South Africa is filled with people who want to work in the public service because they see the bigger picture. We see a lot of professional people from private sector putting their hands up and who are willing to come and help in the government sector. So we have more than enough people to fill positions who are adequately and professionally qualified to take the state service forward, because they feel the calling of bringing their skill sets to government. And that is really where we need to come to. If we talk about professionalizing the state service and creating a merit-based professional public service, then we need to create a culture where it is attractive for people to follow their calling and come and work for government.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Jan de Villiers is the chairperson for the Public Service and Administration portfolio.